The dreamscape shatters around her, threads snapping, shadows screaming as the abyss whispers its final offer. One choice now decides whether she saves a soul or loses her own. Before we step back into the mists, make sure you like, share your theories in the comments, and subscribe to Audible Archives so you never lose your way in the dream. Last time, the prophecy's whispers grew louder. Hidden powers began to stir, alliances shifted, and shadows sharpened into something far more dangerous. Every step forward pulled our heroes closer to the heart of the awakening dream, and closer to those who would kill to keep it buried. Now, in Mistwoven Legends, The Awakening Dream, chapters 9 to 10, secrets will be exposed, choices will carry heavier costs, and the path forward will demand sacrifice. Written by Raul. I'm Nayara, your narrator and host for rest of the series. The dream is changing, and so is the danger. Chapter 9. The Fractured Pact. Reverie stood at the edge of the dreamscape, the soft warmth of the child's peaceful departure still lingering in her mind. The nightmare had been a success. She had woven the child's fears into something bearable, something survivable, but as she exhaled, trying to gather herself, the familiar, oppressive presence of the abyss tugged at the edges of her thoughts. It had been a fleeting victory, but the price was high. The whispers were louder now, more insistent, and she felt its presence crawling beneath her skin, like an unwanted guest in her mind. You think you've won. You've merely delayed the inevitable. You cannot escape me, Reverie. You are mine. She squeezed her eyes shut, the words reverberating in her chest. The temptation was near unbearable, a growing ache in her mind that urged her to listen, to indulge. The abyss had shown her once what power it could offer, had promised that it could ease her burdens, grant her unimaginable strength. The very thought of that power made her fingers twitch, her body yearning for the dark embrace of its force. But the last trial had taught her something. She could not afford to let herself slip again. She had resisted its call. She could do so again. Taking a deep breath, Reverie pushed forward into the next stretch of the dreamscape, her resolve firm despite the temptation gnawing at her. She couldn't let her connection to the abyss dictate her actions. Not now. She had made a pact with herself, and she would keep it, no matter how hard the whispers got, no matter how much the darkness tugged at her soul. But that pact, that fragile agreement, was on the verge of unraveling. The dreamscape around her had begun to shift without warning. The air grew colder, thicker with the weight of some unseen force. Reverie froze, feeling the strange pull of something distorted, something that did not belong. The edges of the dream had begun to ripple, like the surface of water disturbed by a stone, but it was more than just a simple shift. It was chaotic, unpredictable. In the distance, she saw the child's dream fading, melting into something new, something twisted. What had been calm was now a vortex of light and shadow, swirling together in an erratic dance of destruction. Reverie's heart sank as she realized what was happening. The dreamscape was unraveling. The abyss, she thought. It had been a minor slip, an accidental brush with its power when she'd allowed herself to slip into the deeper layers of the dream. She had felt the pull of the abyss, felt its presence creeping under her control. A spark, a flicker, and just like that, a breach had opened. The dream was now infested with chaotic energy, its very essence beginning to break apart. Did you think you could hide from me? Did you think you could weave your fragile dreams without my touch? I am always here. And now, you will pay the price for your defiance. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was a roar filling her mind, drowning out all other thought. Reverie staggered backward, struggling to regain control as the dreamscape around her twisted into impossible shapes. Buildings flickered in and out of existence, the sky bled into violent hues of crimson and violet, and strange, indistinct creatures, half-formed horrors, slithered through the cracks, their glowing eyes filled with malice. Desperation flooded Reverie's chest. She had to fix this. She had to undo what had been done before the dreamscape collapsed entirely. She extended her hands, reaching for the threads of the dream, trying to weave them back together. But the more she pulled, the more it resisted. The abyss was everywhere now, infecting the dream with its chaos, corrupting it from within. Every effort she made only seemed to make it worse, as if the very fabric of the dream had become tainted with the abyss's influence. The dream was fighting her. No, she was fighting herself. The more she tried to restore order, the more the abyss whispered its temptations. Its power, raw and untamed, surged beneath her fingers, promising a shortcut, a way to end the nightmare with a single touch. You cannot fix this with your feeble efforts. Let me help you, Reverie. You know the price, and I know you are willing to pay it. You can end this chaos. You can control it. Reverie's pulse quickened, her mind clouding with the pull of the abyss. She could feel the temptation crawling beneath her skin, urging her to take that one last step, to allow its energy to flow through her veins and restore balance with ease. She could feel its promise, its undeniable power, seducing her once again. But no, not again, she whispered to herself. I won't fall. Reverie squeezed her eyes shut, her hands trembling as she fought against the pull. She had made a promise. The child had been freed, the nightmare had ended. She couldn't let the abyss steal that from her, couldn't let it drag her back into the darkness. She needed control, and she needed to prove to herself that she could resist. This is your fate, the abyss thundered in her mind. You belong to me, Reverie, you always have, and now you will succumb. It was all-consuming now, the darkness swarming her thoughts, its whispers becoming a cacophony, drowning out all rationality. The dreamscape shuddered again, and Reverie felt the tension in her chest, the panic rising. She had only moments before it collapsed entirely, before the child's dream was lost forever. She reached for the strands of the dream again, this time with everything she had. She focused on the child's core, their essence, the things that tied them to the dream, and with a force of will she had never summoned before, she began to unravel the chaos, not with power but with delicate precision, weaving each broken thread back into place. She could feel the dream shaking, could sense the dark energy flooding around her, trying to tear apart everything she was doing. But this time, Reverie didn't let the abyss pull her in. This time, she held on to her own will, her own determination. She worked with the dream, not against it. She resisted the abyss, allowing the rippling chaos to settle as she restored the balance one careful step at a time. Slowly, the nightmare began to calm. The wild flickers of shadow and light died down, the horrific creatures vanishing back into the fabric of the dream. The child's face appeared in the distance, once again peaceful, free from the terror that had consumed them. Reverie collapsed to her knees, her breath ragged, her body drenched in sweat as the last traces of the abyss's corruption faded from the dreamscape. The silence that followed was deafening. Reverie trembled, staring at the now quiet dream, her heart still racing. The child was safe. The nightmare had ended, but the cost had been high. She could feel the lingering presence of the abyss, its hunger gnawing at the edges of her mind. It had been a close call, a brush with madness, and she had barely managed to pull herself back from the brink. For the first time since this began, Reverie wasn't sure whether she had truly won. She had stopped the dream from collapsing. She had saved the child. But she had also lost something in the process, something within herself. The connection between her and the abyss was growing. She could feel it deep inside her, growing stronger, darker, more difficult to resist. It had been a mistake, a breach she could not undo. And now, Reverie feared that the next time, the abyss might not be so easy to banish. For the first time, she wondered if she was truly in control, or if the abyss had already claimed her. Chapter 10. A Kindred Spirit. Reverie had never truly believed in fate, not in the sense that others did. She had always thought that dreams were malleable things, fluid, shaped by the hands that wove them. But as she stood on the precipice of a new and dangerous understanding, she couldn't shake the feeling that her path had been set into motion long before she had even known its purpose. And now, there was no turning back. The echoes of the abyss still lingered in her mind, ever present, like a shadow just behind her thoughts. She could feel its pull, its whispers threading through her every moment, every decision. It was a temptation she could not ignore, even if she had pushed it to the back of her mind, even if she refused to acknowledge its growing influence. But what if she didn't have to fight it alone? It was a thought that had been haunting Reverie ever since she had barely escaped the last trial, the one where the abyss had nearly torn the dreamscape apart. What if there were others who knew of the abyss? Others who had encountered its dark embrace and lived to tell the tale? What if someone else had suffered as she had? She had heard rumors, whispers in the halls of the council about another dreamweaver, someone who had once been a promising force in the world of lucid dreaming. Her name was Serena Moonblade. Her reputation preceded her, both for her power and her tragic fall. And now Reverie was about to meet her. Serena Moonblade was an enigma, a dreamweaver of considerable skill, known for her ability to manipulate even the most volatile dreamscapes. But it wasn't her talent that had made her infamous. It was her fall from grace. It was said that Serena had, at one point, been one of the most brilliant minds among the Lucid Whispers, a prodigy of dream weaving. But her connection to the abyss had altered her, corrupted her, turning her into something unrecognizable. Reverie had been invited to meet Serena, a rare honor. She had heard the stories about Serena's downfall, the whisper of her name in the darker corners of the council, but she wasn't prepared for the presence that Serena commanded when they finally met. Serena's appearance was striking, an ethereal woman with long, silvery white hair that shimmered faintly under the light of the moon. Her pale skin seemed to glow with an otherworldly aura, as if she were a being halfway between this world and the next. But it was her eyes, pale blue, almost white, that told the true story. They were a reflection of the depths of the abyss, the same darkness Reverie had felt tugging at her soul. The moment their eyes met, Reverie felt an unsettling sense of recognition. It was as if they were two sides of the same coin, connected by the same curse, the same dangerous knowledge. "Reverie," Serena's voice was soft, laced with an undertone of sadness. "I've been expecting you." Reverie was taken aback. "You knew who I was?" Serena nodded slowly, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I know what you've been through, what you've experienced. The abyss. It's hard to hide from someone who's already felt its touch. I've been there, Reverie. I've seen what it can do to you, and now it's your turn." Reverie swallowed, feeling an odd mixture of fear and curiosity. She had heard about Serena's fall, but to hear it so plainly, to be confronted with the reality of someone who had been through the same thing she feared most, it made the abyss seem so much more tangible, more real. I don't understand," Reverie said, taking a step closer. "You were once one of the most powerful Lucid Whispers. What happened? How did the abyss take you?" Serena's smile faltered, her eyes growing distant, as if the very thought of the abyss had drawn her into a place she had long tried to forget. "I thought I could control it. I thought I could use its power without succumbing to it. But I was wrong. The abyss is like a hunger, a gnawing, insatiable force that twists you, bends you to its will, no matter how strong you think you are. It's not something you can use, Reverie. It uses you." She paused, her gaze settling on Reverie with an intensity that made the younger Dreamweaver's heart race. "I once believed that I could fight it, that I could stand against the darkness and still maintain my humanity. But it changes you in ways you don't see, ways you can't understand until it's too late. You can't see the cracks forming inside of you, the slow poison that spreads through your thoughts and dreams until you're too far gone to escape." Reverie listened in stunned silence, the weight of Serena's words settling in her chest. She had felt it, the abyss's whisper, its pull, but she had never fully understood the depth of its corruption. Serena's words felt like a warning, a reflection of the very path she feared walking herself. "I thought I could control it too," Reverie said quietly, her voice trembling with the admission. "I thought I could use it to fix things, to make the dreams I weave stronger, more beautiful. But the more I use it, the more I feel lost. I can't tell where the abyss ends and I begin anymore." Serena's eyes softened, and for a moment there was a flicker of compassion in her gaze. "I know what you're going through," she said, her voice low. "I once believed I could keep my connection to it controlled, that I could be stronger than its pull, but the truth is, the abyss doesn't let you go. It doesn't matter how many dreams you weave, how many lives you save, it always finds a way to claw its way back to you, and it will keep trying to drag you deeper." Reverie felt a knot form in her stomach. "How did you escape?" Serena's lips tightened, her eyes clouding with a sorrowful shadow. "I didn't. Not truly. I'm still here, aren't I? But I'm not the person I once was. It changed me in ways I can never undo. The abyss is like a shadow, always with you, always waiting for your weakest moment." Reverie stared at her, torn between the fear that bubbled up in her chest and the connection she felt. She had spent so much time trying to protect others from the abyss, to stop its spread, but Serena's words had opened a door she wasn't sure she wanted to walk through. I don't want to become like you," Reverie whispered, her voice fragile, as if admitting the very thought would break her. "I don't want to fall." Serena stepped forward, placing a hand on Reverie's shoulder, her touch both comforting and heavy with the weight of her own regrets. "You don't have to, but you have to be careful. The abyss is not a force you can tame. It doesn't care for your good intentions, Reverie. It only cares about feeding on your soul until there's nothing left, and when that happens, you'll be lost forever." Reverie nodded, the fear in her heart now mingled with a sense of urgency. She didn't want to end up like Serena, hollow and fractured by the abyss's touch. Then what do I do? Reverie asked, her voice shaking with uncertainty. How do I stop it? Serena looked at her, her face full of a sorrowful understanding. You don't stop it, Reverie. You can only learn how to live with it. You will never truly be free of it. But you can choose how to live with it. You can choose to keep fighting, keep resisting. But you have to remember, the abyss is always waiting for you to slip. And when you do, it will take everything you've worked for, so be careful. The weight of Serena's words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time since Reverie had encountered the abyss, she truly understood the danger it posed, not just to the dreams she wove, but to her very soul. It was a force that could break her, could take everything she had built and turn it to dust. But as Serena had shown, it wasn't the abyss's power she had to fear, it was losing herself to it, and Reverie wasn't sure if she could survive that. The mist thickens, and the next choice could shatter everything. You've just heard chapters 9 to 10 of Mistwoven Legends, The Awakening Dream, an Audible Archives original, written by Raul and narrated by Nayara. If you felt the pull of the prophecy, like, comment and subscribe, because what comes next will rewrite the rules of the dream. The awakening is only beginning.
Another chapter closes, but the archives remain, waiting for the next seeker of stories. Here, no voice is lost, no tale truly ends. This is Audible Archives. Until we meet again, may your mind wander freely and your heart never forget the stories we share.